microsporogenesis. That means the process by which pollen grains are developed. You've already learned in the last class that how anther will develop, how in the anther there will be primary parietal cells formed and inside primary sporogenous cells formed. The primary parietal cells will give rise to endothecium, middle layers and tapetum, and primary sporogenous cells, they will remain inside and later on they will convert into pollen mother cell, isn't it? So today's class will discuss first how the primary sporogenous cells will convert into pollen mother cell and they will finally result in the formation of pollens. Alright, so let's start. See, microsporogenesis. Microspore means pollen grain and genesis means formation. So microsporogenesis means pollen grain formation. See, at first, suppose these are the primary sporogenous cells. Okay? The primary sporogenous cells, after getting proper nourishment and protection, will develop into pollen mother cells. Alright? So they directly will convert into pollen mother cells, which are diploid cells. Okay? The pollen mother cells will secrete a callose layer surrounding each of them. Callose is nothing but beta-1,3-glucan. Due to the callose layer, now each of the cell will behave as a single unit, individual units. And now, after they become individual units, they can finally undergo meiosis. Alright? So suppose I am taking into consideration a single pollen mother cell. So the single pollen mother cell, when it will undergo meiosis, in that case, you already know from the cell division chapter that meiosis gives rise to 4 haploid daughter cells, isn't it? So 4 haploid daughter cells will be formed. Okay, by meiosis in the pollen mother cell, and this 4 haploid daughter cells, they are nothing but the pollen grains. These are haploid. Now when the pollen grains are first formed by meiosis, they are going to remain together. 4 of the cells are going to remain together. That's why we will call them pollen tetrads. What do we call them? Pollen tetrads. Alright. Now, pollen tetrads can be of certain types according to their arrangement. Fine. Let's see. Types of pollen tetrad. There are mainly 5 types. First, tetrahedral. That is going to be like this. It's very common in the dicots. You might be thinking this is not 4, this is 3, isn't it? The 4th cell is below this 3, here at the center. It will be below the 3, hence we cannot be seeing it otherwise. Second is isobilateral, which is common in monocots. Like this. Third is decusate, which is going to be as such. Alright. Next, rectilinear as in straight, and fifth one is T-shaped. Means here there will be two pollens, and then here the two others. So forming a T shape. Alright. So these are the 5 types of pollen tetrads that can be seen. This is most common in the dicot, this being in the monocots. Alright. Now, there is one species in which all the 5 types of pollen tetrads have been observed, that is Aristolochia elegans. Aristolochia elegans is the one in which all the 5 types of pollen tetrads have been observed. Alright. Now, sometimes what happens, you see, the pollen grains, they are otherwise and mostly, they will be separated from one another. They will separate, and once they are separated from one another from the pollen tetrad, and only then we can call them as individual pollen grains. So, individual pollen grains will be mostly formed in the angiosperms. But then, in certain of the species like Jatropha, okay, or Typha, these 4 pollen grains, they will not separate. They will remain together as tetrad itself. We will call such a condition will be to be compound pollen grain. We call it compound pollen grain. So for compound pollen grain, example will be Typha and Jatropha. Alright. Also, in certain of the species like Calotropis, or related plants, it has been seen that all the pollen grains present, they will remain interconnected to one another, forming a large mass that's called pollinia. Alright, so that is related to the process of microsporogenesis. That means development of pollen grains. Alright, next topic is structure of pollen grain. After formation, immediately, the pollen grain, it is going to appear like this. Immediately after formation. It is going to be uninucleate with a prominent nucleus at the center. It is going to have dense cytoplasm, and it is going to have well developed cell wall. Alright. The cell wall is going to be bilayered. So this is the prominent nucleus. This is the dense cytoplasm. And this is the inner wall that's called intine. And this is the outer wall that's called exine. Together, intine and exine are referred as sporoderm. Alright. Now, see, the exine is going to be made up of sporopollenin, which is a highly resistant fatty substance, and it is going to be so resistant that no known enzyme can be hydrolyzing or breaking it down. Okay, it is highly resistant to temperature, acid as well as alkali. Fine. On the other hand, intine, it is going to be made up of pectocellulose. That means pectin and cellulose. Alright. Now see, certain parts of the exine might not possess deposition of sporopollenin. It might have more thicker like intine here, or else there can be callose deposited here, but sporopollenin will be absent. Alright. So this portion conditions where sporopollenin is absent would be termed as germ pore. Germ pore is the site from where pollen tube will be arising out when the pollen will germinate. Alright? Do remember, germ pore will be mostly 3 in dicots and 1 in monocots. Alright, and because the sporopollenin being the outermost layer of the pollen grain, which is highly resistant, that's why the sporopollenin itself will allow microfossilization of the pollen grains. Fine. Another important terminology that you must know here is that there is a study, a specific branch of science that deals with the study of the morphology or structure of pollen grain, and that is known as palynology. Palynology, study of morphology or structure of the pollen grain. Alright. Now, next thing you must know is about the sporoderm. Let us discuss the sporoderm in a little bit of details. Now, sporoderm, you know, consists of mainly 2 layers, right? That is exine and intine. This is outer layer, this is inner layer. Right? Now, exine, if you look at properly again, you will find that exine itself is not single layer. It can be again divided into 3 layers. Tectum, okay, which is the outermost discontinuous layer. Baculate layer, that is the middle layer. It is also discontinuous, and the innermost is foot layer. This one is continuous. These 2 are discontinuous layer and this one is continuous layer. Alright, outermost, middle and innermost layer. Now, it is the tectum which is of most importance. Alright, why? See, tectum, it will provide certain kind of sculpturings or designs on the surface of the pollen grain. Like if you see certain pollen grains which are borne by insects in entomophilous flowers, you will find that those pollen grains will have some spine-like designs on their surface. Likewise, for anemophilous flowers, they will not have spines, the pollen grains, but they will have some kind of a pattern or design on their surface. So these designs or these sculpturings or patterns, they will allow the palynologist, okay, those people or those scientists who study pollen grains, they will study the sculpturing of the outermost surface of the pollen grain, and then they will be able to identify that from which species the pollen grain belongs. Alright, so that's why tectum is of taxonomial importance. This is very, very important. Means it is tectum which will allow identification of the species, right? And anything that helps you identify a species becomes a taxonomical aid or a taxonomical tool. So that's why tectum is of taxonomial importance. Alright? Next, let us discuss pollen viability. Pollen viability. Now, what is pollen viability? The ability of a pollen to germinate is after release from the anther and to cause fertilization is going to be called as pollen viability. Mostly, the ability of the pollen to germinate would be termed as pollen viability. Alright? Now, pollen viability will keep on differing from one species to another. Like in certain plants like rice or wheat, pollen viability is simply within 30 minutes they will lose their capacity to germinate. Whereas in certain members of Solanaceae, or Rosaceae, or Leguminaceae, the pollen viability might last for several months. So it will keep on varying from one species to another. But of course, nowadays pollen viability is not going to be causing much of a problem. Why? Because nowadays we have a technique called cryopreservation. Cryopreservation means an advanced technique in which we can store pollen grains. We can store pollen grains indefinitely. We can store them indefinitely at minus 196 degrees centigrade at liquid nitrogen. And here they can be made to remain indefinitely and can be also kept viable. So in that case, by this advanced way or technique, we can keep or we can store the pollen grains in their viable state indefinitely throughout. Fine. Next, let us discuss a few things regarding advantages and disadvantages of pollen grains. First, starting with advantage. See, bee collected pollen grains, mostly bee collected pollen grains, they are nowadays collected and they are sold in the market in the form of tablets and syrups. Why? Because this particular pollen grains are highly enriched with proteins, carbohydrate as well as minerals. So they are taken up by athletes mostly to increase their stamina. So bee collected pollen grains are taken as syrup or capsule to increase stamina. Alright, this is the advantage. Moving on to disadvantage. In the disadvantage, we have to mainly mention the Anemophila species which undergo wind pollination. These species, to make sure fertilization occur, they will be bearing or they will be producing a very large quantity of pollen. And these pollens, if are inhaled and they enter our respiratory system, they can cause various types of allergic reactions. Like the most important being hay fever. The most important mention here would be Parthenium. Parthenium, it entered our country as a contaminant with imported wheat, and then later on it spread it to the entire country. Okay. Apart from Parthenium, there is Chenopodium. Then there is Amaranthus. And also there can be another example of carrot grass. These are important examples of pollen allergy causing or plants which causes pollen allergy. Alright. So let it be up to this for today's class. In the next class, we'll start with the next topic, that is male gametophyte development or pre-pollination development.